Evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here with us this evening. My name is Roseanne Santos, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And tonight we have a really special program in store in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. We are introducing you to John Jay alums and faculty who have some expertise on how security and protection management and law enforcement have changed since then. A really important topic for us to understand, and really as a way to remember what happened on that day and how we have come a long way in how we protect our establishments, our businesses, and our citizens. And with that, I want to introduce to you this evening's moderator, Professor Brian Higgins. He is a faculty member at John Jay in the Security and Protection Management Department, and he will get us going with introductions and questions of our panelists. Brian, thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Roseanne, thank you again for inviting me here tonight and allowing me to participate in such an important webinar. I think it's extremely important that we not forget what happened on September 11th, that we not forget those we lost and all the heroes that were came to be that day. I think it's a real feather in the cap of John Jay that John Jay continues to remember September 11th and continues to help our country evolve in the world of law enforcement and security. Again, thank you, Roseanne. This is a great honor. For everybody who joins us here tonight, I want to welcome you and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and your evenings to join us. This is a very important topic. It is a very solemn topic, but at the same time, we're going to focus on how we've moved forward in the world of security and law enforcement from that dark day of September 11th. So I'd like to get right into it tonight. I would like to ask our panel to introduce themselves. I'm going to start first with Mr. John Friedlander. John, welcome tonight. Thank you for your time. I'd like to introduce you to the crowd here tonight by way of letting you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Brian. Very glad to be here. Very glad to be included on the panel. Always an honor to participate in John Jay events. So I graduated from John Jay College with a Master of Science in Protection Management in May of 2001. I absolutely loved my course of studies. I loved some courses more than others, but John Jay provided a tremendous network and background for me to launch a career in security. I was in the process of sort of re-engineering my life from the late 90s into the 2000s, and I got very lucky with Professor McCree as the department chair at the time. I currently work as a security consultant at Kroll, and my title is Associate Managing Director. I've been there 9 years. And I also have the privilege of teaching at John Jay. I'm an adjunct professor in the Security, Fire, Emergency Management Department. And that privilege extends to being tasked to teach some of the courses that I took as a student and other courses, and bring to those courses things I use in the profession of security, security management, security operations, and also refresh the lessons that I learned back then for now, for 2021 and beyond.
Thank you, John. I appreciate your participation today and what you mean to the field of security management. Next, I'd like to introduce our next person on the panel, Chief Joe McMahon. I can't see your name, Chief.
Joe McMahon. Thank you very much, Brian. And thank you, John Jay College, on many levels for making me what I am today, as a matter of fact. Many years ago, unfortunately, before many of you were born, I affiliated myself with John Jay College through a young man in the admissions office named Jim Curran. Jim Curran got me started on my degree because I was working with a program called the Cadet Corps, a very good program very much tied in with John Jay College, leading young people into the law enforcement business. I graduated John Jay College in 1989 with a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice and planning. It helped me in my career because at the time you needed to have a college degree to become a captain in the NYPD. The NYPD is where I started as a young rookie cop many years ago. I went through the ranks, did more than 30 years with the NYPD before retiring and coming over here to the MTA Police Department as their acting chief of police. So John Jay College got me up and rolling and on my way up the ladder in two different agencies. I'm forever grateful.
Welcome, John, and thank you again for your time, Joe. Next, I'd like to introduce Steve Palumbo and ask Steve to introduce himself and tell us about him.
Thank you very much, Brian. Very happy to be here. I want to echo the sentiments of my other two panelists. John Jay was very instrumental in my career and helping me advance over the last year. I graduated in January of 2002 with a master's in protection management. John and I were classmates together. I've spent my entire career in corporate security. I've recently ended a career with Tiffany & Company where I left there as Senior Director of Security Operations. Currently, John and I are colleagues together again. I'm a Senior Manager at Kroll. I've been here a little over a year. And I just want to say that, participating in something like this with John Jay is very fulfilling for me because I got so much out of the school and out of the program. To echo John's, the networking that I made and the lessons I learned there, I've taken with me throughout my entire career. And I'm very happy to be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you to all our panelists. It's very important that we, as I said before, continue to remember September 11th. Focus on where we've come as a country and focus on where we're still gonna go. And also to paint law enforcement and private security in a very positive light. The young men and women I speak to at John Jay, see, like the rest of us, what's happening in law enforcement and the media. And I hope tonight encourages them to continue forward with that path of entering law enforcement or consider the world of private security. I, for one, think that's one of the largest changes I experienced personally after September 11th was that relationship between law enforcement and private security and how we came together and recognized that this is going to be a team effort. For those of you who in the world of security know the organization ASIS, there was a very well-known security director, Rick Briscola, who saved countless lives on September 11th. And who knows how September 11th would have rolled out had many people in the world of security and law enforcement listened to Rick prior to September 11th. So I think that's a big step in the right direction. We have a few topics we'd like to discuss tonight. The first of which I'm going to read off, and then in the same order, I'm going to ask our panelists to participate and share based on those discussions. So first and foremost, I'd like to know what inspired you to join this profession. So let's start with John again. John, what made you? I found it very interesting that you gave us an insight into how you were kind of got to John Jay and how you were kind of getting into this world of security. So please share with our group here tonight.
Sure. So I always had an affinity for law enforcement and security. I grew up around police officers, grew up across the street from a station house in Manhattan. Always appreciated the presence of a uniformed cop and a dog on the subway. The sense of security that imbued. There are two things I'd like to relay. The first is during my studies at John Jay, and this is about either late 99 or 2000, Professor McCree brought in a guest lecturer who was the security director at the World Trade Center. And he presented to the class examples of mitigating controls that they had enacted since the '93 bombing. And it was mostly physical, with a fair amount of operational. And now to my memory, right? Because this is 22 years ago, but the way I remember it, during that guest presentation by Professor McCree's invitee, the penny dropped for me. I had been studying up until that point security management, security operations, protection management curriculum, all the courses I was taking. But in that presentation, things started to make sense in terms of how they were manifested in the world. And I realized that there was solutions. And something sparked in me that, that's the end application, all the pieces we were learning about. And it was a combination of anti-terrorism, counterterrorism, crime prevention, visitor management. It touched everything. And regrettably on that event, that individual did not make it out of the building, which just made it even that much more poignant and sad. The other piece is I understood security as a business from my studies. And for me, some of my professors that I was able to engage with really inspired me. And speaking freely, I was taking a course that was taught by Paul DeMatteis and Diane Hartmus. They were co-teaching or co-instructing the course. And I didn't know a specific career path, but I knew I wanted to work in security. And whether that was on the retail side or on the corporate side or the investigative side, I was keeping an open mind. And literally 2 or 3 days after September 11th, so that would have been that Thursday or Friday, Paul DeMatteis called me to come to work for him. I didn't know it at the time, but he was a director of security at an insurance company in Newark. And I was one of a few people he called to come to work for him. So it wasn't so much that I was necessarily inspired or dogged, putting out applications. I was sort of taken by the scruff of the neck and put at a desk. And literally over the next 6 years, I went around the world for that company doing target hardening, risk assessments, security awareness training for staff. And that's what really launched my career. I owe it directly to the work I did in the classes and the friendships I made, as Steve alluded to.
Thank you, John. Chief, if you can share with us.
Joe, if you don't mind, I'll just a quick comment on something you had just said about the partnership between law enforcement and private security. Never was it more outstanding or obvious than it was after 9/11. We need each other and we continue to need each other every single day. But as far as how did I choose a career in law enforcement, as many people in my profession, it was a family tradition. My father was a police officer. My cousin was a police officer. My brother became a police officer. So the choice was pretty easy. I knew what I was getting into. So many young people today don't know. They don't have a family member or a close family friend that they can rely on to give them some advice or tell them what it's really like. I had the advantage of living it every day when my father would come home from work and tell his stories, or I'd get together with my cousin and he would tell his stories. And it was just riveting and fascinating and sounded like the job that was for me. And sure enough, here I am 40 years later between 2 different agencies, and it was certainly the way to go.
That's great. That's a great story. Steve, can you share with us?
Sure can. Similar to what John said, I always had an interest in law enforcement and private security. My dad actually was a security director for a period of time in his career. So security was kind of always around the house. I was initially interested in a career in federal law enforcement. That's kind of where thought I was heading. And for a lot of reasons that didn't work out. And I was insecure, and I had decided to make security my career. And I think what really drove me to that, I wanted to go back to school, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to go back for. And John Jay had such a tremendous reputation. And I did some research, and they had just created this protection management program, which was, a master's degree in basically what I wanted to pursue. Currently, my current job where I was currently working, and I wanted to move ahead. And I felt that the program that John Jay was offering was going to give me that kind of that nudge in my career, that boost, and it really did. After 9/11 happened, security got very intense, especially in New York City, and there was a need for professional security people that were trained and educated and had been in the field, and it really kind of launched my career, because when 9/11 happened, I was fairly early in my career. I had a bunch of retail jobs before that. I'd really just gotten into corporate security, and I think it was a combination of finding the program at John Jay, and with my prior interests, and then seeing what happened after that event that really kind of launched me into the field.
That's great. I've been asked to share my background as well. Mine is pretty similar to the rest of us on the panel here tonight. I came from a long line of cops, third generation. I'm only third generation American. All three generations have served in the military and law enforcement. My dad, my brother, my grandfather. At one point, 4 of my cousins and my brother, all in the same age group, served. But my route there was a little bit different because I came from such a big police family and was almost assumed that's what I would do. I was going to go in a different route. So I actually went to school to be a Baptist minister. So I went to a Bible college and a seminary. And halfway through, I ran out of money. So I joined the National Guard to get the GI Bill. And when I did, I entered Air National Guard and became a security police member. And then I realized it was in my blood and I really liked it. And I kind of changed course, finished my work at the Bible College, taught high school for a year or two, and then took the road to being law enforcement. I'm in a different end of it. My brother and I are both retired now, and we hang out a lot and talk about cop stories. But kind of the same thing, right? When it's in your blood. And during September 11th is when I really became interested in security because I saw how critical it was. And then follow up after September 11th, our relationship with security and law enforcement blended so well, and there was almost no line anymore, right? Where law enforcement and security kind of was separated before that. They're critical roles in defending our homeland. So let's move on to the next topic. If you're comfortable, and please, we respect all of you here, but if you can share some stories or your involvement in September 11th beyond what you've shared. I know we've all talked about already, but if John, you can give us an example of what September 11th was like for you.
Sure. 20 years and a couple of weeks later, it's still very raw. It's still an atrocity in my mind. It still hurts. In terms of directly and personally, I was much more in proximity to the buildings during the first attack. During 1993, I was literally right on top of them at the time. On September 11th, 2001, I was in Midtown. I wasn't working that day. I saw the second plane hit on the news, as so many of us did. Kind of in my gut, it felt like what it turned out to be, an assault on our country by radicalized terrorists. Although I am a civilian, I did wind up down there very shortly afterward as a volunteer for the Red Cross, staging out of the St. John's building. And my strongest memory of the pit is the first night on duty, a friend, a cop, who we just bumped into each other, took me out to the pile. It was still on fire. It was about 8-10 days later. And this steam shovel, part of the excavation, this was late, it's about 1 or 2 a.m., took a big hunk of metal out, and this flame and smoke erupted from the pile. So much later, that's a vivid memory. And the loss of friends, direct and indirect. still very hurtful. I'll leave that there.
Thank you, Steve, John. We appreciate your sharing. I know it's not easy for any of us, but I think it's important that we share those stories. Chief, can you share with us?
Well, it's been 20 years, but it seems like yesterday. I was driving into work, and as everybody knows, it was a clear Tuesday, nothing special, no holidays, no special events arranged for that particular morning. It was just a normal, clear, crisp Tuesday morning. And they came over the radio, listening to the traffic reports, and it came over the radio that a plane struck the World Trade Center. And I said, oh, wow, it's terrible. But then they started interviewing witnesses who said it looked like it was deliberate. I said, nah, it doesn't sound right. But then the second plane hit, and you knew it was deliberate. I was 30 miles out of the city, driving in on the Long Island Expressway. You could see the smoke, and you can see the flames from 30 miles away. I'm sure you could see from further, but I was 30 miles out. As I got into the office, I was looking for my boss. I was the commanding officer of the chief of department's office. He had run out already, was at the scene. So of course I went running over to the scene. I got there as the second tower was coming down. I did not know the first tower was already down because of the thick smoke and dust and dirt that was in the air. People were running like crazy at me. I didn't know why. I heard the tower coming down. I thought it was another plane, but it turned out to be the second tower coming down. What struck me was the number of shoes, thousands and thousands and thousands of pairs of shoes, because you can't run fast if you're wearing dress shoes, high heels, whatever. And people just ran out of their shoes. There was debris all over the place. It was very cloudy, very dusty, tough to see, tough to deal with. And what we lost that day, or at least what I lost that day, was a sense of security and safety and invincibility. We live over here. We're far away from all those troubles overseas and everything else. It reminded me of how the world must have been prior to Pearl Harbor. We thought we were safe. We were far away. We had two oceans, on one on each side, and they got us at Pearl Harbor. Well, they got us again at a time when we thought we were invincible. And that sense of security and invincibility is pretty much gone now. Every day you have to realize that we are vulnerable, and we have to be aware, and we have to rely on private security and law enforcement to keep us safe.
Thank you, Chief. Steve?
Sure. So it was a Tuesday, and I was in school. I had night classes, so I had driven into the city early. I didn't want to. That was my only option, getting out of class so late. So I had driven in. I had walked up to my office, and I was walking into a meeting. And as I turned the corner, there was a crowd in front of a colleague of mine's office listening to a radio, and they said, plane had hit the World Trade Center. Now my wife works on the bond market downtown, very close to the Trade Center, and would from time to time go visit clients at the Trade Center. Cantor Fitzgerald was actually one of their clients. So I picked up the phone immediately and called her. And as I was on the phone with her, the second plane hit. So I advised her to immediately get out of the city. We had to get back to the store. So I went back to work, and I do remember crossing 57th Street and the sirens and the fire engines flying past me, over and over and over again. I couldn't get across the street. There were so many of them. I think one of the couple of the most vivid memories I have is, so I went back to work, and I was working at the store at the time, and they made the decision to open, which against my wishes. And as we opened the door, there was a gentleman standing on the sidewalk on his phone crying. And as I walked down to the street, I looked downtown, and all you could see was the smoke. And everybody on Fifth Avenue was literally in tears and crying and screaming. It was a very, 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 very tough scene to witness. We eventually did close, and I was stuck in the city. I had driven in. My car was parked on 10th Avenue by school, so I had to spend the night. And I remember right before the sunset, I went up on the roof. I wanted to see, what I could see from downtown. And I remember looking up and seeing fighter jets circling Manhattan. And to echo everybody else's statement, that feeling of security was gone. If to see fighter jets circling the city, one of the most frightening things I think I've ever witnessed. So that's kind of what happened for me on 9/11.
Well, I leading up to the collapse of the towers, I was posted at Route 3 eastbound right at Giant Stadium, because very early on, we realized there will be assets coming to help out. That this was, at that point, we figured out it was, or those in charge realized it was an attack. And we didn't have access to the radio and communicate and all this stuff that the TV. I was sitting in the car with another officer, and we knew that was the World Trade Center collapsing. Just, we saw this faint smoke and then this massive cloud. And yes, you're all those feelings you gentlemen shared, I felt all at once, right? I can't believe this happened here. I can't believe this is happening, and almost not believing that those are going to be bodies or pieces of bodies to recover, but hopefully we can get as many people as possible. So there was still this hope. And then very shortly, I was moved up to the George Washington Bridge so that the Port Authority officers can go down to their headquarters and dig. And then the following months afterwards, I worked on a team that answered to the Port Authority Police and NYPD. And what we did was escort large pieces of equipment or other pieces of equipment as they coordinated first the rescue and then the recovery. So as you know, that area is very small. And those large cranes that pick up the large pieces, they take about 8 or 9 tractor trailers to bring in that equipment and load it. So what they got really good at was coordinating that time. So you didn't have to take equipment out and then wait while a crane was built. So there was a coordination of equipment, and we were given different routes at different times, where to bring the equipment and stage it. We did that for about 6 or 7 months, but I still remember from those days after those next 6 or 7 months, quite often going down the West Side Highway with large pieces of equipment. And as we get closer to September 11th, people with the flags, people coming up to the police car and kissing your arm, giving you sandwiches, it was an incredible feeling. No, I'll never forget that, and I hope I never do. I'm in that later stage of life, but I still have a 12-year-old at home, and I make sure he knows about September 11th. Gentlemen, I'd like to move on to the next point. Since September 11th, many things have changed, and this is really the meat and potatoes. After what happened, after the change in our feeling of security, what did we do? What changed as a nation? And what changed in our fields in security and law enforcement? So let's start with you again, John.
On a grander sort of global macro scale, my sense is we've taken our eyes off the threat still posed by radicalized terrorists. We're seeing maybe not the grand attacks, but I just have a feeling that we've grown out of or grown away from acknowledging the threat to our very existence, the dedicated adversaries that are arrayed against us. These are difficult political times, and I'll not go much further down that road at this moment, but we were very united against that particular threat for the next several years. And it was a deep, concentrated focus, which seems, to my mind, to be somewhat diffuse, more specifically to security, corporate security, and our practice. There was a tremendous appetite for prudent security measures, starting within the year after the event, I'd say through the next 10 or 12 years. Companies, enterprises had high appetite to protect themselves, to protect their assets. And I believe that this dovetailed with emerging and advancing technology. So things like access control, things like video surveillance, improved and modernized, and were well funded. And there was an appreciation and an acquisition phase that furthered that. I'm not saying that stopped, But the amount of advancement through 5, 8, 10, 12 years after September 11th, 2001 was tremendous. And the adoption rate was significant. In many ways, that's become a baseline. But I believe that the appetite for security awareness, physical security assessments, and an understanding of the need to strategize corporate security assets has changed. Part of that is because other elements indirectly related to security have taken prominence: business continuity, disaster recovery, resilience, some of which is more heavily mandated for certain sectors of business than physical security itself. And certainly the digital cyber world has eaten our lunch to a large degree. It's much better funded, much better populated, and not nearly as questioned to a level of necessity as physical security is. And we could even look at areas like security awareness training for staff. Of course, during pandemic times, that became more difficult, understood. But it'll be very interesting to see what morphs over the next 2, 3, 4 years as we repopulate office buildings, as companies find whatever the next normal is, to see what the next stage is. But I think we've grown away from an understanding of the various threats arrayed against the private sector. And I'm pleased to come back to that if there are follow-up thoughts.
Thank you, John. That's good stuff. Chief McGran?
To John's point, complacency is probably our biggest threat right now. We've become too complacent. Time has passed, 20 years have gone by, and we've lost that sense of urgency. We have fallen back a little bit. Again, whether it's something John brought out is how united we were as a country back then. It was a time where we all came together and we worked together for a common goal. And we have drifted away from that as things will drift away. The whole world changed that particular day. There's a whole generation out there right now that is used to taking their shoes off at the airport, getting frisked at sporting events, walking through a metal detector. It comes naturally. Nobody thinks twice about it. But those things were unheard of, when some of us were growing up. The idea that you had to be searched before you went into a venue. So many things have changed through over the years. Now we're not just concerned about the major attack, which we should be, and as we should be, but we're also concerned about that lone wolf. We always talk about the lone wolf, and we hear about it from time to time. It wasn't that long ago. In fact, it was on Halloween just a couple of years ago, where a lone wolf jumped in a truck on the West Side Highway and started to run people down. It's not that long ago that the lone wolf attacked people over in Europe, in France, in Britain. The individual that becomes radicalized and takes action out against the public. These are things that we constantly must be alert to, not just in law enforcement, but once again in private security. We have to partner up. We have to remain strong partners, and we have to keep ourselves aware of our surroundings.
Steve? Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. I want to echo the comments I heard. We have definitely taken our eye off the ball. I agree. I think John and I probably see this a lot in our current careers around the world. It's nowhere. I think memories have started to fade, and there's not the same level of interest there was immediately after 9/11. And some of the things I saw change after 9/11, to John's earlier point, companies that in the past had sort of a blasé attitude towards security, or maybe no attitude towards security, all of a sudden were very interested in security. If you remember really what else happened, in the fall of 2001, after 9/11, the city was besieged with bomb threats. I mean, for weeks there was bomb threat. I mean, every time I looked out my window, there was another building, emptying out into the streets. That was piggybacked on with the anthrax attack. So there was a lot of fear in the city, and so there was a lot of appetite to increase security across the board. Speaking from personal experience, I was in charge of the budgets at my department at the time, and it tripled but before the end of the fiscal year, They had tripled our budgets. And the place I was working was considered an iconic landmark in the city. We were considered, we were one of the top 10 tourist attractions in the city. So we were given a lot of resources to do a lot of the stuff that, that John was talking about, the access control and the awareness training and all the different things that were in the past a struggle to get approved, and where we had to kind of fight and kind of always kind of justify our existence. All of a sudden, we were key players. They needed us, and they wanted our expertise, and they wanted our knowledge, and they wanted to know how we could help them secure their facilities and secure and safeguard their people. That was a huge change. The industry, it was a seismic shift after 9/11 in private security. And another thing I saw change, security as a career, I think, private security, there was really a need for professional security folks, not, and if you didn't have a law enforcement background behind you, that wasn't so much as a detriment as it used to be. Like if you had the education, if you got your degree and you graduate school as well, and had the work experience, you could, and I think all of us here approve, you could have a very, very successful career in private security going forward. And I think that changed after 9/11. It was really seen as more of a professional discipline and of a very respected professional discipline.
I would agree, Steve. I would agree with all of you. Gentlemen, what I'm hearing collectively is we're afraid. And I would chime in with that. We're concerned about the fact that we've taken our eye off the ball, to quote one of you. Some of it has to do with the fact that we haven't had a major attack to the level of September 11th. But what concerns me is the global environment right now. Those who we thought were going to attack us again were foreign-born terrorists, but they had a fight out in the Middle East, and that fight is over for them, right? Afghanistan, Iraq, and they've had 20 plus years of practicing terrorism. And I'm concerned, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, gentlemen, collective mouths, but are they going to turn their focus now from the battlefields in Iraq and Afghanistan to our country again? For the last several years, we've been focused on homegrown violent extremists as our number one threat, and rightfully so. But are we going to go back to these battle-hardened terrorists? I just see now, I help clients in the private sector, and for quite a few years, there was a lot of focus, and John and Steve, you could probably echo this. A lot of private sector organizations looked at blast resistant, right? Blast resistant curtains and walls and glass, because that was our threat at the time. And we've kind of moved away from that, haven't we?
Yes, we have. You're right. It would blast resistant was top of mind in the years after 9/11. I think what I'm seeing right now, there's more of a concern right now with internal threats. The active shooter, and the active shooter training and the target hardening and keeping people out of facilities who could, possibly cause harm. That's more of the focus right now than what was after 9/11, which was the blast resistance and the target hardening. It's more internally now. It's because I think more companies are more concerned with an active shooter situation than with a terrorist attack.
I would agree. John, anything to add there?
Yes, two things. And really speaking to the students that are listening at the moment, we've nailed it. We've told the story of what the topic is, but to look at it from an academic perspective, if we protect to a level of counterterrorism, we control crime prevention. If we only protect to a level of crime prevention, we're still vulnerable at a counterterrorism or even anti-terrorism level. There are distinctions between counterterrorism and anti-terrorism, not looking to get too semantic, but a lesson, a takeaway here would be crime prevention gets us here, but the sophistication, particularly of a complex attack, requires a different level of planning, a different level of vulnerability mitigation, of risk management. So that's a key point. Another piece, and this speaks to what each of you have said, is, and I heard this from a John Jay adjunct, most large-scale terrorism events eventually become a fire event. We may need the intel community up front. We certainly need law enforcement. We need EMS. But whether it's Bataclan or any other type of event with or without explosives, eventually there's a place for fire. And I just want to make a case for this because Steve and I have mirrored each other in this. One of the best things I've done as part of my academic evolution and advancement was getting the fire safety director credential. Mine focused on the high-rise environment. I understood security. I have the master's, got the CPP, all good. Understanding the fire component, particularly for the high-rise environment, has informed and improved my practice as a security consultant immeasurably. So there's value there. And it does touch directly, of course, on our department, security, fire, emergency management, but also on protection of assets. And Steve and I could tell story after story of doing walkthroughs of company offices, whether it's on the 30th floor or on a 40-acre campus, and finding obstructed stairwell doors, fire exit signs that are not illuminated. They seem really like granular problems, but if I hadn't been trained to look for those, it's an issue. And where I'm going with this is we can lock every door 14 different ways. But if we can't have a safe, passable point of egress during a smoke or fire condition, we violated our obligation to our tenants, and we're violating occupancy code and statutes. I know I went a little bit off the branch there, but there's a direct line to fire planning and prevention and preparedness, because it also informs evacuation planning and preparedness. And when we go out to do active shooter drills, the first question we ask is, when was the last fire drill? Are they familiar with the stairwells? New York City's EAP, Local Law 5, did a great job getting there. It was a messy process, not gonna lie, but it did a great job of helping building managers and their tenants understand how to get out of their buildings in a hurry, or what to do if they're not supposed to leave their buildings in a hurry. And we can take questions on that, because I'm sure we've all got eons of experience in what I just described.
No, I would agree. I have one question for Chief McGrand, and not to put you on the spot, sir, but in this world of this changing environment where I think we all collectively agree, we almost feel like, or it seems as many people feel like we've checked the boxes already and we're safe. When September 11th first happened, the focus was on air travel and air travel security. And then shortly after our attack, we had the London Underground attacks in the UK. But we still are not the same level of security in rail as we are and surface travel as we are in the air yet, are we?
No, it's an open system, and we're in an open and free society. We keep our guard up. We ask the See Something, Say Something program. We're asked for the civilians help in this. But as long as we're an open system with an open society and we're free to travel about, I don't see it being as an airport where you have that controlled entry point, and then you have another controlled entry point to get on the plane, and there are all kinds of different barriers in your way. You can enter the subway system at any one of our 400 stations. You can enter the commuter rails at any one of our stations. So as long as that's the case, it's never going to be as tight and as controlled as the airports or some of the other facilities, such as a cruise ship, for instance. You can't get on board a cruise ship without certain protocols in place.
And I'm surprised, Chief. I teach Homeland Security classes. I don't know, when I ask for examples of security security issues and terrorism globally, almost never do I get an answer about terrorist attacks on the rail system. Yet in other parts of the country, surface like bus in Israel, the UK, I was in Russia, taking a train from Moscow to the southern part of Russia, when the train that passed us that was going to St. Petersburg was hit an explosive device on the way. So even in countries like Russia, where we don't get the news all the time, the rail system, surface travel is still a target for these terrorists, right?
The rail system will always be a target for, of opportunity for people that want to cause mischief. Recently, we've had people throw things on the tracks. We had just one the other night. They'll take a shopping cart or a bicycle, and they can cause a tremendous amount of damage. You can only imagine what an explosive device would do in our system.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Steve or John, did you guys want to circle back before we open this up for questions?
I just want to echo what John said about the fire safety component to the to this discussion. I also have my FSD and my EAP certifications through New York City, and found it valuable. And I think it's a great kind of melding of all of it. You know, we talk about security and law enforcement working together, but security, law enforcement, and fire also need to work together. You know, so it's just I just want to echo those statements that I think the fire safety and the emergency action director positions that the city offers are excellent avenues to pursue, because they will definitely help you in either of these careers.
That's very helpful, and that's our point, right? To encourage those who would seek a career in law enforcement and security, and how we can help them get to that goal. So, Roseanne, do you have some questions from our participants?
Yes, I do. First, thank you. I learned a tremendous amount here today, and it just goes to show what I say at every one of my events. And that is that the John Jay alumni community is extremely dynamic, robust, intelligent, mentor worthy, because I'm always looking for mentors for our students. Just a fantastic group of folks who just are so knowledgeable in these niche areas. And I will never look at an exit sign again the same, John. So thank you. And the first question that actually it's mine, I will admit. Someone mentioned that, you can lock every door, but if there's something off around egress, you're still in trouble, right? I think it was you, John. So I think about the same thing I've been in higher ed over 20 years. I have a child in high school. And I think it doesn't matter who's in the outside community, because often the threat is someone who belongs in the community. So when I think of the high school shootings, I think of Virginia Tech, I think of all of these things. What do we in the higher ed admin, let's say, someone like myself who's been in higher ed, who works in spaces where we can talk about policy and protocol and assistance to whatever students might need, what else can we do, I guess, toward prevention? I mean, I don't know, is that even possible? The way Chief McGran said, if you're in a transit system, it's always going to be vulnerable because we have 400 points of entry. So what happens when the people who caused the terror belong in the building, have an ID card that they can swipe and get in? What are some of the strategies for people who want to get into law enforcement to start thinking about, or for administrators to kind of start that level of protection?
John, you want to jump in first?
I'm pleased to. And Roseanne, thanks for the question. On an overview, school shootings, high school student on faculty shootings in the academic environment are a unique animal and separate from some of our discussion about September 11th, but the best deterrent to an individual, and 99% of the time within a school, it is a student, again, student on teacher violence, is other students. Teenagers, adolescents have a very hard time keeping things to themselves. And what we see over and over again is that the active shooter, the teenage adolescent active shooter, plans for some period of time and moves across a pendulum of threat to going operational that can be, I don't want to say detected, but observed and noticed by their peers. It's what we call leakage. They sketch diagrams, they put things out on social media, they have to express it. So our work, threat management and insider threat, is very important. It's just a different dynamic in the school setting, but within the corporate high rise or a campus or a college or a research factory, once again, security awareness for workplace violence, prevention and planning falls along the same lines. Seeing someone who decompensates, someone who's agitated, someone who is not themselves and is experiencing distance and potential mental illness, who starts to have either weapon fascination or extreme anxiety. These are all telltale signs that warrant being escalated, much like the peer in the high school, the factory floor, or the office environment. There has to be a conduit to communicate these threats upward into management or HR or a school counselor, with anonymity granted to the person sharing the information, and action, well-trained recipients of that information to know what to do for next steps.
John, would you say it's fair to say that security is more than just physical measures, right? That's processes as well, like a way for employees to identify potential shooters, right? And a process to let the company know.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve and I work closely on what we call operational security measures, and that extends to different layers of training for senior management, executive leadership, managers, and staff members. But there are very concrete responses that are somewhat universal. They're different, again, in the workplace versus the academic setting. And within the academic setting, they're different in high schools versus colleges, based on the nature of campuses, the nature of the student body, but they're very specific prescriptive steps that can be provided to help mitigate these risks, as long as they're dealt with up front. Once the individual has entered the campus or the office, prepared to do violence, gone operational, as we say, we're behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, I can't agree with John more. He really, the biggest component to security, in my personal opinion, is training. Train the people working in the office, train the students, and we're not just talking, run, hide, fight, which is, what happens once the actor is actually on premises. But to John's point, and I've had a lot of success with this in my career, is the de-escalation and being able to identify a potential problem and having that mechanism to call it out. And I saw it happen over and over and over again in a former life, where we were seeing these things in a corporate environment, in a factory environment, where people were acting in a certain way or behaving in a certain way or saying certain things or posting certain things on social media. And because of the awareness training that was shared with the employees, it was called out and it was dealt with and mitigated before it escalated to a situation where you had to get into a run, hide, fight situation. So I think awareness training and how to spot these indicators is key. And it's a huge part of security. And it's a huge part of what John and I currently do.
Thank you. Chief McMahon.
Before I get to the question at hand, the idea of mentoring came up before, and you're absolutely correct. I'm a big believer in it, as is one of your other adjunct professors. Alden Foster always talks about mentoring and being that person that makes a difference in somebody else's life. But to echo what John and Steve are both saying, you have to be able to recognize those stress factors that are going to push somebody over the edge. The people that are being bullied, whether it's been in school or at work, the person that's under intense personal pressure, maybe it's from divorce, maybe it's from another family issue, financial issue, the pressures that are being borne on somebody. People in the workplace know, and it always seems to be that way after the individual explodes. Oh, I always knew he had a temper, or I always knew this. He always talked about that. They have to be able to communicate, as John and Steve both pointed out, they have to be able to communicate through management up channels saying, listen, this guy's got issues here and somebody has to deal with it, whether it be the HR department or somebody else within the agency. But this person has a lot of personal problems, and I'm concerned, and that's the word you use. I'm concerned about this person and that they may harm themselves or someone else. So you have to be aware of your coworkers. And to your point about being more than just physical protection, you also have to have some type of insight into behavioral aspects of the workers that you're with.
I'm happy to say that John Jay has a behavioral intervention team. So if any faculty or staff, or even any of you, if you were ever to mentor one of our students, even though you don't have a formal affiliation with the college, you would be able to, let's say, reach out to me as kind of your liaison and say, hey, I'm noticing suicidal ideation, or I'm noticing something, or, you know, awry, or even if a student is going to drop out, that can all be sent to this team that's a compilation of faculty members, counselors, administrative staff who can intervene and help the student move forward in a positive direction. So I just wanted to put that out there because I know people are listening and will listen to the recording. But the last question I wanted to put on the table, and it's one that comes up a lot, it's one of my primary goals with the program that I do, with these programs that I do, is really to help our graduating students and maybe even recent alum in the past year to 3 years understand how to get a foot in the door. And I know that's a little astray from the topic, but I can't let all this expertise go without asking that final question of, you know, what advice do you have for our young people? It's a tough market out there. I would love to start with you, Chief, because you're already in the PD system. And I know a lot of our students are like, what do I need to do to successfully get into the academy, to pass the academy, to be a great, you know, cop and move up in the ranks? And I know that's a lot of questions for 2 or 3 minutes, but, you know, your best advice to our young people who want to get a foot in the door with NYPD or transit or any kind of law enforcement in the city.
My first affiliation with John Jay College came through what I discussed before about the Cadet Corps,
Yep.
an excellent program. If you can get into it, it pays your tuition, it gives you a job, and it shows you what police work or law enforcement work is like. Even if you decide it's not for you ultimately, it gives you a taste of it, and you will never look at law enforcement the same way again. I would also recommend that you get one of the civil service newspapers, because it's not just the police department. It's also the corrections department. It's also the court officers. It's also, you know, different law enforcement agencies. And it will tell you when the exams are coming up. It will tell you where they're going to take place. It'll tell you how much it's going to cost. And then, of course, what you had mentioned earlier, the business about mentoring. And I know John Jay College has some great mentors up there. So if you need information on corrections, or you need information on courts, or in the police department, there are people at John Jay. I've met them. They're wonderful people, and they will help you. They'll be happy to talk to you about it. The last thing I can say about that is that the NYPD is always hiring. They are always hiring. Now, if I can just give one piece of advice, and I give this to even my incoming recruits and cadet, social media. Be very, very, very careful what you put on social media, because there's no such thing as erase, delete, or otherwise remove. Look what's happened to this coach, the football coach, who wrote something in an email, I don't know how many years ago. It's always there. And somebody will always give it up. It's not that reporters are that adept, they're smart or anything else. Somebody you know who does not like you for whatever reason will give that up to prevent you from moving forward. Maybe they're jealous of you. Maybe they didn't like you for another reason. Maybe you're dating their ex, who knows? But whatever you put out there is out there forever. So be very, very careful as to what you put out there on social media.
Excellent.
Yeah, Roseanne, if I could echo the chief.
Yeah.
You know, when I ended my career, I was the chief of the county police, and then I moved to the director of all public safety for Bergen County. So involved very much in the hiring process. It's not just those verbal statements, those written statements. It's those images. We used to call it the red solo cup effect. So if there's pictures of you 4 years in college at parties with red solo cups barely being held in your hand, and it looks like you're intoxicated all the time, that's going to really hurt your chances. So be very careful about social media.
I know we're all glad there was no social media when we were in college.
That's
I
for
know
sure.
I am. I talk about this with my girlfriends all the time. All the time. Steve, I see that you unmuted.
Yeah, no, I want to, as the father of two 20 or 20 somethings, I am constantly preaching, watch what you put on social media. And, you know, I am in the mentoring program here at John Jay, and I've spoken to my mentees about it. And I've mentored other students at my former institution. It's, to the chief's point, it's there forever. You know, it's not going away. And to kind of circle back to what you'd originally said and how to get your foot in the door, I was going to say networking is huge, you know, and creating that LinkedIn profile and reaching out to people. And to kind of tie the both together, you know, if you're going to create a LinkedIn profile is professional. It's not where you go and spout your political beliefs or anything like that. It's a professional networking site, because, you know, you're free to post what you want to post, but it's out there. And to think people
That's
don't
not
have,
where you go to swipe left?
no, no,
No.
no. But
No.
I think so. I agree wholeheartely. Social media will trip you up if you're not careful. And second thing, I think networking is a very enormous way to get your foot in the door, meet people. Don't be afraid to introduce yourself to people. And another thing, I think, you know, getting your foot in the door, you've got to be willing to pay some dues. You know, in my former life, I did a lot of hiring, and I would see students that came out of college with their degrees and a lot of debt, you know, and they would see the jobs that are being offered, and they wanted to kind of jump to the head of the line. And it doesn't really work that way in the real world. You've got to come in and you've got to be willing to pay some dues and work those entry level jobs, you know, and kind of struggle for a couple of years, improve yourself, and that with your degree will propel you forward. Okay, so you have to come in with that expectation that, you know, I got to start here at the bottom and I got to work my way up.
And let me just say, this is how Steve and I met, through LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And since we've met about, I don't know, 6, 8 months ago, we've been talking about this very event that has finally come to fruition. So it was his idea. And, you know, programming is a very important part of my job and my evaluations. And when I have an alum bring me a gem and an idea, I bounce on it, I jump on it. And it really is a great way to further the network. And look, we're here now having a really important conversation. So thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
John, do you have any parting words before we end?
There's three things I'd like to say very, very briefly. The
I'm
first is,
counting.
there's number one, there's not a comment I've heard tonight that I disagree with. Everything has been right on the money. Number two, to Steve's point about paying dues, I was told very early on, the dues bucket is never full. So for someone looking for work or looking to get connected, there's really nothing beneath us. It might mean standing a post or doing a type of work that we're not directly interested in to get a foot in the door. There's tons of work out there. It just, sometimes we have to settle to move up. And then the big point for me on reflection of my work path since I graduated John Jay, there hasn't been a job I've had where there isn't someone else from the college directly on board with me, whether that be a peer, a boss, a colleague in another department. They may not all have been from protection management. Some were from criminal justice, some were from forensics, public administration, but everywhere I've worked over the years, there's been a John Jay or a bloodhound somewhere in proximity. And I don't take that lightly. So I'm very grateful to have been included tonight. This means the world to me to be able to give back just a little bit.
And it means the world to me that you were also willing to give of your time. It's 6 o'clock. You could be eating dinner with your family. So I do appreciate you. And I was once told to always wear a John Jay t-shirt at the airport, because there's always some TSA agent or some police officer or someone in the airport who works at John Jay. And it gives you a little extra love when you're at a crowded airport. So that might be something to consider. Brian, thank you so much for agreeing to moderate. I look forward to the day that I can meet you all in person. I've only been able to meet all of you online virtually. But again, this is, if I could ever be of service to any of you, this is what I do at John Jay. I am in charge of alumni engagement. And this is what engagement means to me. It's about your time, it's about your talent. And that's crucial to our young people and to even our alums who are your peers who might be doing career changes. Everything you've said and everything you've shared has been really meaningful and important. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening. And again, if I could ever do anything to be of service, you have my email, my cell phone. Do not hesitate. So, and thank you everyone out there for listening.
Thank you.
Good
Have
night.
a wonderful evening, everyone.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.